Being able to report your results in a visual way is very important. First, it will allow you to report a lot of information in a very concise way. A table or graph may convey a lot more information than text for the same space on your slide. The same for a visual representation or an image. A picture is worth 1,000 words, plus it's also more convincing. When seeing your image, if it's well chosen, your audience will directly understand what needs to be concluded. Your audience will see the conclusion by themselves. It will probably be more convincing than any textual claim you could make. Seeing a decline in sales or proportion in histograms don't need a lot of explanations, and that's exactly what you want to obtain, this aha effect. The best way to learn about data visualization is to be exposed to a lot of examples and try by yourself to understand what works and what doesn't. That's why in the recital we decided to present a lot of examples to provide you with a kind of library of data visualization approaches. But one could already keep in mind some principles. First, if you want your audience to remember your key message, you want to prune everything that is not absolutely necessary. That means that you shouldn't discuss what's not relevant, as I said before, but that also means that you shouldn't show what's irrelevant either. If a point or a line is not relevant in a graph, remove it. If a column or a row is not relevant in a table, remove it, and so on. And by not relevant, I mean that it does not add to your message. If it's just something interesting but not really useful, it should go away. Second, parallelism works. If you want your audience to compare things, make it comparable. Place comparable elements at the same level in a table, for instance. Or if you're using colors to distinguish between different groups in a graph, use the same color scheme from the beginning to the end, even in the text. Or always align comparable objects on your slides. I think you've understood the point. What I say is that you should always try to be as consistent as possible in your presentations and use parallel structure when you want to emphasize the comparison between elements. Third, few people can see in more than 2 dimensions. So always try to report your analysis along 2 dimensions, at most. You will notice that most of the strategic representations are very often 2 by 2. The McKinsey matrix, the BCG matrix, and the likes. If you cannot avoid working on many dimensions, use a radar chart, for instance, which is a neat way to project several dimensions all at once into a plane. Finally, use images that people will understand directly by using representations that are standard and as concrete as possible. You remember the horses and the wild bulls. They were standard and concrete images, something that people would directly understand. And so, use standard representations as well in your own presentation. For instance, if you want to report market share as a function of 2 factors, use a bubble chart, with the size of the bubble being the market share and the 2 axes being the 2 factors. This is standard. Do not reinvent the wheel, as the purpose is to make your message as easy to understand as possible. Many visualizations have been used in the past before you've worked on this specific topic. Reuse them as much as you can. That's why we'll try to provide you with as many examples as possible with the recitals. But you should continue learning by yourself, by having your own visualization library in your brain. To conclude, let me repeat again that the objective is to find the right balance between the quantity of relevant information and conciseness in order to be clear. This is very important, but not very easy. You want your presentation, your work, your story, and your slides to be as beautiful as it can be. And always remember that the temple of Apollo, the Greek god of beauty, bore the inscription, Mede Nagan, nothing in excess. It's an aesthetic principle that you could see as another version of the Occam's razor. If an information is not absolutely needed to convey your message, you should remove it. Now it's the time for you to practice by yourself again. We'll present examples in the recital. But whatever you could see in this course, at the end of the day, you will have to learn it by yourself. Data visualization is not a science, it's an art. Actually, it's even more of a craftsmanship. If you want to improve, you should practice, practice, and practice again.